Hello there, people of the internet. I am over here. I got my Mosin out here with me, and I was thinking about back whenever these right here were incredibly cheap rifles. Back, 2012 or so, there were some gun scares going on in the United States, and the prices on these absolutely raised. Let me give you some insight behind the Mosin, why they were so cheap, and why they no longer are, and how that was the starting point of the ruining of the military surplus market. Now, before you guys go lynching me in the comments, hear my argument, listen to what I have to say, because I am going to make some really good points. And I know it's not directly, I know the Mosin is not directly the result of why the military surplus market is the way that it is today, but it's definitely the rifle that started everything off. So let's go ahead and dive into that. Back in, I don't know, before 2010, these right here were being surplused into the country by a massive truckload. Bloc countries were trying to get whatever money they could for these rifles, so they were selling them for dirt cheap, and the United States civilian market is, of course, one of the civilian markets that bought them up by absolute, cargo ship loads. And they were being sold on the United States market very cheaply. A lot of people consider these to be garbage rods because a lot of them had shot out bores, and a lot of them are sticky and not very good, etc., etc. So a lot of people just wouldn't touch them. There was not a high demand for them. Now, fast forward to about 2012, there were some political issues with people panicking, like, oh god, the government's going to come take our guns, so everybody needs to buy as many guns as possible. And of course, people are going to lean towards buying the cheaper stuff over the more expensive stuff simply because, hey, it's cheaper, I can afford it, and I can afford to get 5 of these versus at the time one AR or one AK. I think ARs were still quite expensive for that particular time period, but anyway, that's probably a video topic for another video. But the Mosin was one of those rifles that was available all over the place, and they doubled in price basically overnight. I remember going to my gun store and I saw a Mosin for $80, and then there was a big gun scare. Went back a week later, same exact Mosin on the wall was now $160. That's something I'll never forget. And I was like, this is where it starts. This is the start of the decline, and there's nothing that I can do about it. And I just had to sit back and watch everything just unfold the way that it was. So, a lot of people will say that it's a supply and demand thing whenever it comes to military surplus on the market. That is, it's got some validity behind it, but that's definitely not the main case. Like, for example, there's plenty of Mausers on the market, right? However, a German Mauser fetches an absolute premium of a price in comparison to something like a Yugoslavian Mauser. So the collectability of the firearm and the desired want to have that particular firearm in your collection definitely drives up the prices way more than supply and demand. And in this particular case, with the Mosin, it got from garbage rod to people actually buying them since they were dirt cheap and everyone needed to get as many guns as possible because of the big scare. People were starting to figure out, hey, these rifles are actually halfway decent, and they're definitely worth the amount of money that you're spending on them. Well, people start spending money, buying Mosins, and retailers just decided to themselves, you know what, we're going to charge more and more and more because, of course, the demand is going up as people realized how good these rifles were. Now, as the price of the Mosin went up and up and up, because it was by far the most popular military surplus rifle, just because for the time period in the United States, just because of the sheer numbers that were being flooded into the United States during this particular time period, everybody wanted a Mosin. Whenever it was discovered how cheap they were and how good they were and how available the ammunition at the time period was, everybody wanted them, and so prices on them continued to raise as demand continued to raise. We still had the influx of Mosins coming from specific countries coming into the country, but just like what we see with a lot of imports nowadays, retailers, despite the supply, are going to charge the amount of money that people are willing to pay for them, simply because people are willing to pay for them. Just because you have, I don't know, a stockpile of 10,000 Mosins, if people are going to pay $400 a Mosin, there's no point in charging $80 a Mosin. So that's one of the main reasons why the prices went up. So, a lot of people were trying to buy these as quickly as possible, and a lot of people saw the prices going up, which dramatically increased the demand of the Mosin. And that is the big thing. People saw prices going up, and so they went out and they panic bought Mosins by the absolute truckload, to the point to where the surplus was completely dried up, and basically the only Mosins you're getting nowadays are sold on the private market because people bought them literally by the crate load whenever they could afford them. So fast forward another couple of years, and we got basically all the Mosins on the civilian market, and people are trying to charge like as much money as they could get people to pay for them, and people are continuing to pay these prices. A lot of the reasons why people are paying the prices for Mosins is because Mosins were dirt cheap, and if you didn't get a Mosin while it was dirt cheap, well, you kind of have a little bit of a void inside you now, don't you? A little bit of a regret, thinking to yourself, oh boy, I should have got one of those. I still can get one of those. Maybe I will get one of those. Or maybe you're somebody who missed out on the capabilities of the military surplus market back whenever all this was dirt cheap. But hey, you still really want a Mosin, so maybe you're going to go out and purchase that. As the Mosin prices continued to skyrocket, other military surplus prices absolutely followed along. The Mosins were cheaper than the Mauser, and they still kind of are depending on what model of Mauser you get, the country of origin, etc., etc. There are some cheaper Mausers out there, like cheaper variations like the 93 Mauser and etc., etc. But there's also much more expensive Mausers. I know the M96 in 6.5 Suite, those Mausers tend to fetch a pretty good price just because it's one of the finest Mausers out there on the market. But anyway, that's probably another topic for another video. I'm making myself a good list of different video topics that I'll be recording here. As the Mosin raised in prices due to panic buying and people wanting to have a Mosin before the prices got too high, and then prices get too high, and people still paying those extraordinarily high prices simply because they want the Mosin because they missed out on it, it is, oh, what would you call it? Trying to get rid of the regret of not getting into the military surplus market and getting the military surplus whenever it was dirt cheap. So you're just willing to pay those prices, and because people are willing to pay those prices to try and get rid of that regret, that's the prices that companies are charging. Now, I know that the Mosin basically eliminated the cost effectiveness of the military surplus market as it raised in prices, and people's desire for the Mosins and willingness to pay for the Mosins caused other military surplus firearms to also raise in price because there was that demand for them. There are military surplus rifles out there that are being imported into the country that are not overly expensive, but that's just because there's not a whole lot of desire for them. This right here is one of them that I just happened to have inside the room upon time of filming. This right here is a Steyr straight pull rifle. This is the 8890. There's also M95s coming into the country, and you can pick these up for not a lot of money. The reason why they're not a lot of money is because the ammo for them is basically not obtainable. That right there is still chambered in the original 8x50 cartridge, not the 8x56, and as a result of that, that is basically impossible to shoot unless you're going to make your own ammunition, I guess. There is some very, very small amounts of like fire-formed brass that can be sold out there on the market. Basically, a lot of it is made from 7.62x54 rimmed. Very, very similar dimensionally speaking. We just have 7.62 bullet versus an 8mm bullet. And maybe I'll talk about that on another video. Haha, another video topic. But if something comes into the country and somebody can't shoot it just because the ammunition is not available, then the only people who are going to be taking those rifles are collectors like myself. You know, people with YouTube channels, people who have a reason to get that rifle, and that's a very limited market in comparison to people buying the rifles to actually take them out and shoot. So the lack of demand on some guns like this one right here, just because of the lack of ammunition availability, or perhaps something like the Carcano, however it is you feel like pronouncing that, those Italian bolt-action rifles chambered in 6.5mm or 7.35mm. The ammunition for those is also quite expensive and quite difficult to get your hands on, and that's one of the reasons why those bolt actions tend to be a little bit on the cheaper side in comparison to some stuff like the Mosin. Now, that being said, the Carcano is quickly raising in price as people are buying them up and realizing how good of rifles they actually are. So I recommend that you get one before the Carcano pulls a Mosin and absolutely skyrockets in price. It's already to the point to where the Carcano is fetching prices that you could get yourself like a sporterized Mosin for, and they're just not worth that price, especially with the lack of ammunition availability. So, all in all, it all started with the Mosin. The Mosin's not necessarily what caused everything to start, but it was definitely one of the huge driving factors whenever it comes to the downfall of this military surplus market here inside the United States. I know a lot of other countries out there. I get a lot of comments from all over the world. They'll tell me, no, the Mosin's still dirt cheap over here where I'm at. Well, you don't have sanctions against the countries that are trying to export the Mosins, and the United States does. I'm not going to argue whether or not that is right or wrong. I'll let y'all yell about that in the comments with each other. That's I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.